Welcome to another Excel VBA tutorial. In today's video, we are continuing our exploration of the Word object model, and we are going to take now list objects and copy them over from our Excel workbooks into a Word document. So we've done charts, we've done Excel ranges, we need to do list objects or Excel tables for short. And we're going to do just one in this video, so that's usually how I do is I just do one and then we'll go on to the multi version of it in the next video. But let's just jump into it and get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our Visual Basic editor. So we're just going to go into that. Okay. And then from here, we need to create a new module. So we're just going to right click and then go to Insert Module. And then that will create a new module. I already have one, so I'm not going to, create a new one. And then from here, we have to enable the Word object model. So by default, it is not enabled in your workbook when you create a new one. So you have to enable it, and that way we can leverage that object model from within the Excel VBA editor. Gives us the ability to declare variables as certain Word objects, and then also we leverage some other things related to IntelliSense. So to enable it, you need to go up here, so right where this little ribbon is, and you're going to go down to Tools, and then References, and then from here you're going to get a list of all the object libraries that you can enable. Well, I've used this library before, so it's already enabled for me, but if this is the first time you're using it, you will not see it here at the top. So what you need to do is you need to scroll down to M for Microsoft, and then you want to go to W for Word. So it'll be somewhere right around here. And all you want to do is make sure that you just check the box like that. So there should be a little check in that box, and that will enable it. Now you might see a different number than what you're seeing on mine. So I have 16. That means I have the latest version of Office. However, if you're on an earlier version of Office, you will see a lower number. Now, everything that we're going to do today should work regardless of what version you're on, unless you're on a very, very early version like, I don't know, something from the early 2000s. Okay, and then from here we can press OK. And then what we can do is we can create a new subroutine. So we'll call it sub list object to Word. And we'll do single this time, right? Okay. And then from here, we're going to declare our variables. They're going to come in two groups, one for Word and then one for Excel. So we're going to declare Word variables, and then the first one that we're going to declare, so this is we're going to actually declare our variables, is we're going to call the dim keyword, and then we're going to call the Word app, so that's the name of our variable, and then we're going to declare it as a Word application object. So that's just like the Excel application, but now we're working with Word, and so we're creating a variable that will house that application that we can then call at different points in our code. And then just because we have a Word application, we will find there's actually nothing in it if we open it. So we want a document. So we can think of a document as like a workbook in Excel. And so we'll create a new variable called Word doc. And this one will be a Word.document object. So this is like an Excel workbook, but now we're in Word. So now we call them documents. And then from here, we're going to declare one last variable, and it is called a Word table, so Word table object. So we've seen with PowerPoint and even in Excel, you can have these table objects, and they have certain properties and methods that are unique to them, so they're not like a typical range. We will find that Word has their own table objects that we can then call certain methods that will help us format it, or even certain properties if we want to get some information about that particular Word table. So that's why I'm declaring it, is because I'm basically setting the stage for later in my code where I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to potentially work with this Word table, and I want to be able to store it in a variable. And then from here, we need to declare our Excel variables. And we only need to declare one, and that is the actual list object itself. So the actual list object that we're going to copy over from our Excel workbook into a Word document. Now, technically you don't have to do this, but this just makes it better when it comes to writing your code in a more shorthanded way. And really at the end of the day, you should always, declare your object variables, at least the ones that you plan to work with, because it does help you whenever you work with IntelliSense. Okay, and then from here, I call it Excel list object. And then this one will simply be a list object variable. Okay, so now that I've done that, we need to actually create an instance of Word. So you can currently tell that we have Excel open. So if you notice that my little two windows pop up, they're related to Excel, but you can also tell that, wait a minute, there's no Word application. So we actually need to create a new instance of this application. And really what we're going to do right now, you've seen it in the other videos, you can carry this over. I mean, you can use this methodology to, open PowerPoint, Word, Access, a lot of different things. It might not be exact when it comes to actually displaying it, but at least to create a new instance, it's pretty much always the same. So we'll create a new instance of Word, and then so what we're going to do is we're going to set our Word app. So we're basically saying, hey, here's my variable. I'm planning to store something into it. Well, what am I going to store in it? Well, I'm basically going to store in it a new Word.application. So I'm creating a new instance, and that new instance will now be stored in that variable. And then just because I've stored it, now all I have to do if I want to call this instance is I call Word app, and then I can do different things with that. I can call certain methods. So if I call the activate method, it will bring it to the front, but in this case I want to make sure it's visible first, so I call the visible property, so property about our particular object, and if I set that equal to true, this will make it where I can see that particular application now, because by default, just because I create a new instance doesn't mean it's visible. And then from here, then I would call the activate method, and so the activate method would bring it to the front of my system, so it would be the main window. And if you ever want to know, the little green, I guess they're like squares, if that's what they are, they're methods, and then the ones with the little fingers that kind of point to these like little tables, those are properties. So that's just an easy way to distinguish the two. And then from here, actually, just so you guys can see it, if we run it, you can tell that, it has a new application, but there's nothing in it. I mean, there's no document, there's no information. So it's really just a shell. So we need to actually create the document ourselves. So we're going to create a new document in the Word application. And so what we're going to do is it's very similar to like what we did above. So we're going to set our Word doc, because we're going to create a new document, and then I want to store it somewhere because I'm planning to manipulate that document somewhere else in my code. So I'm going to say, okay, take my Word doc variable and set it equal to, well then if I want to create a new Word document, I have to go into the Word application itself, so the object, and then I go into the documents collection. So this is a collection of all the individual document objects in Word. Well, currently there's none, but if I call the add method, it will add one new document to my documents collection. And so from here, what this is doing is it's creating that new document, and now it's storing it in that variable Word doc. And then from here, now we have a document. And so if I run it again, you'll see basically that blank page that we're used to seeing when we open Word. So now it looks like we're used to seeing when we normally open Word. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to create a reference to the list object that we want to copy over from Word over from Excel into Word. So what I want to do is I want to create a reference to this little list object right here. Now, there's two ways we can always reference a list object, because both of them require us going into the list objects collection. So basically all the particular list objects for a current sheet, but we can reference them two ways, using either the index method or the key method. And so when we write this, we're going to create a reference to the list object we want to copy. And so again, because we're working with an object, we use the set keyword. Excel list object is equal to, well, the list objects collection, so the actual collection of list objects is only found on an individual sheet. Now, in our situation, I don't mind it being the active sheet, so I'm going to say, okay, take my active sheet, so the sheet that I'm currently on, and then what I can do is I can go into the list objects collection. And then from here, what I can do is I can actually reference the individual list objects. So there's two ways. I have an index method where I can pass through just the index or the order in which they were created, or I can call the key method, so the actual name of the table itself. So if you ever want to know the table name, you just highlight it. Really, you can just be anywhere, but you just have this little ribbon that pops up. And then from here, you can just go over here to the far left and it will say table 4. So, I'll do it that way just because I don't think I've actually shown it that way in a long time. So I'll just do table 4. And now we've created a reference to that particular list object. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to call the list object. And then there's a property called range. So this is basically the range that this particular list object takes up on our worksheet. And if I call the range property, I can then call the copy method. Now, you can technically call the copy method without actually specifying the range, but for Word, it's a little bit more different. You actually will encounter an error. With Word, we have to actually define the range. In PowerPoint, we didn't have to. It worked fine. But in Word, if we don't specify the range, it will give us an error. So we always have to do the range property first and then copy the actual list object. Okay, so now that we've done that, what we can do is, just as a good habit, we should pause our application whenever we copy information from one application to the other. So we're going to pause the Excel application, for 1 second. Nothing major, but enough to make sure that the information actually makes it into the clipboard. That's probably one of the most frustrating errors on the planet because it just is very unstable. One day your code will work, the next day it won't work, and literally you change nothing. But it just simply comes down to the fact of sometimes the program runs a little bit too fast and the information never actually makes it into the clipboard, or it makes it in there and then the clipboard just decides to get rid of it. And so, it does happen sometimes. So usually what I tell people to do is just pause it just to be safe. And how we do that is we call the actual application object itself. So here we're actually referencing the Excel application. And then there's a method called wait. So we call that method, and then we pass through the now function. And then we have to say, okay, well, how long do you want to wait? So we'll take the time that currently is, and then just add 1 second to it. And then you want to make sure it's AM. Don't do PM. Please do not do PM. You will be waiting here for a very, very long time. You want to make sure it's AM. And then with this, we paused it. Now we can actually paste it into our Word document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that down a little bit. And really what I want to do, I'll comment this out just for a second, just so you guys can see it. So when I create a new document, it already has a selection for me. So you see where my cursor is blinking? That's the current selection within the Word application itself. So what I want to do is I'm just going to keep it simple at this point. Let's just paste our list object to where my cursor is blinking. And so I want to take the Word app selection. Now we have to be careful with this one because every application in itself has something called a selection to a certain degree. And so we have to be careful about what selection we're talking about. Are we talking about Excel selection? Are we talking about the Word selection? We have to be very explicit at this point, because if we're not, VBA is not going to know necessarily what selection we're talking about, and it's just going to go back to the default application that you're currently in. So if you're in Excel, it's going to go to the Excel selection. Now, what I want to do is I want to specify with the word app selection. So what I'm going to say is paste the object. And so we're going to say with the word app, so the actual word application itself, go into the selection property, so the current selection that you're in. I'm going to close my with statement. And then what I'm going to say is paste Excel table. So this will paste an Excel table for us. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to take our range and it's going to paste it as a table object within Word. So it's kind of just a shortcut to create a table object. Now, technically, if you did it just as a regular paste, it's still going to be considered a table object. But this is, I guess, the more official way. But what we need to be careful with this one is all the properties, all the parameters about this particular method are required. So if you do not pass it through, you will get an error. So the first one is linked to Excel, and then it's colon equal. I'll do false for first. I put a comma. I'll put Word formatting. So do we want it to be the formatting in Word? In this one, sure, why not? And then there's RTF, which text format. I can't remember exactly what that is, but I think it's just more, again, about related to the formatting within Word. We'll set it equal to false for right now. And then on the next example, we'll do it as true just to kind of see what the difference is. And so if I do this now, let's see what it looks like. Okay, perfect. So it took our little table and it copied it into Word, and then more importantly, it kept the formatting the same as what we have in Word. So we'll go back and we'll change the parameters again, just so that way you guys can see, really what's the difference about it. So for here, I'll just put that as equal to true. And then this one, actually, I'll say, hey, keep the formatting from Excel. And then the rich text format, we'll put that equal as true. And we'll just see what the difference is. Now, with the linked ones, you got to be careful sometimes. They do this little weird thing where sometimes they'll paste and they had that little gray stuff. It's very sporadic sometimes. Sometimes it pops up, sometimes it doesn't. In fact, a couple examples ago where I was doing this just with myself, it did do that for some weird reason. It seems to be the linked property. So for whatever reason, the link property seems to be giving that little gray, like we're already selecting it. But if it comes up and that's really bothering you, you can always do an OLE object by default. I've done that in the other videos, so ideally just watch those ones, and the logic's the same. That seems to fix the issue if you're really concerned about it. But as you can tell, now it kept the formatting, and then it looks like a blue. I think it tried to do blue. It's kind of like a purple, but this is now kind of a linked object. So if we can actually update that link. And it's considered a linked macro-enabled worksheet object. So pretty cool, actually. Yeah, it's kind of like that when I do this. It could just be the selection. So that's basically how we can take a single Excel list object and then copy it over into Word. But let's kind of expand on it a little bit more and see how we can format it from within VBA as well, because naturally we might paste and say, hey, we want to do just a couple formatting stuff, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a reference to that table that we just pasted. And so we're going to create a reference to the table we just pasted. Okay, and so I'm going to scroll this down a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit easier. Alrighty. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set that Word table, so that Word table object variable, the one that we declared up here, we're going to set that equal to, and then we're going to go into our Word document, so the Word document itself, and then within the Word document, so the actual document, there's something called tables. So there's a tables collection which contains all the tables in your document, and I want the one that I just pasted. Now, if I wanted this to be a little bit more dynamic, probably something I would do is I would just kind of do Word doc .tables.count. And so this will count it because the index is always just the order in which we add the table to our document. So this will always give us the latest one. Now you can always pass through the actual index itself, and I think with this one too, I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure there's a key method as well. But for the most part, I just like to do this one. I just like to do the actual count just because I think it's a little bit, more consistent. And then once we've done this, this will create a reference to the table. It's stored it in our object variable. So now all we have to do is just call this word table object, and we can do certain things like, for example, do we want it to allow autofit? Yes, I want to make sure that it autofits to the particular document. And then what we can also do is we can say, hey, take that word table and then set the autofit behavior, so the actual method, and you can change how you want it to fit into your window. So there's autofit, word autofit content, word autofit fixed, or window. If I do window, it will basically take up the entire page. I'll just do it like that for right now, and I'll run it again. So you see kind of how it took up the entire margin. So now it kind of takes up the entire page. I kind of like that personally. I think it looks a little bit cleaner. So if I was going to ever be pasting it, I would probably do it like that. And then there's things I can do as well. So I can actually determine spacing. So this is spacing in between each cell. This kind of is interesting because I've never actually seen a table look like this. But if I just put this to something like 20, it's just kind of more interesting to show it than explain kind of what it is. So it does this little thing where it puts spacing in between it. It doesn't look that great, but I'll tell you what, if you do that with no filling or anything like it, it doesn't look half bad. I actually thought it was really unique looking. I probably wouldn't do it, but maybe there's some kind of reason of why you would want to do this, but it is at least there for your reference if you ever need to have spacing between rows or something like that. I just thought it was kind of funny because I've never actually seen a table like that until I did it in VBA. And then we can also do things like shading, so we can actually set the entire color of a particular word table. So if you go into the shading property and then you go to the background pattern color, and then you can do index, and then we can do all these different colors. So you can do red, black. Where'd it go? I'm going to delete it again. And then we'll do turquoise. It's probably going to look pretty ugly, but that's okay. Yeah, that's pretty bright. I don't know if I would like that. But at least there you can see that you can actually change the background color as well. Let's just do one more. We'll do the 4 color. So we'll say maybe we want it to be all, I don't know, black or something like that. So we'll do the foreground pattern color index property. And then with this one, there's so many options sometimes. I have to always double check it. Otherwise I'll get lost. We'll do bright green. We'll just make it very bright today. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh wait, did that not go right? Oh, I think that's because the foreground coloring. Oh, yeah, I guess that one won't work either. We'll just keep it to the background pattern color index. So yeah, that's just kind of some basic formatting of how we can, take our table. We can do some spacing. We can do some background pattern color index. There's naturally more we can do. So in the next video, I'll kind of go into some different other options and then, kind of explain what those ones are. But if you have any questions about how to kind of take a single Excel table, copy it over from Excel to Word, please put those questions in the comments below. Try to get back to you. Also, if you can make sure to like the video, we always appreciate the support. And then also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, you should think about subscribing so that way you get regular updates, as we release new videos related to VBA and Python. I've been working on the YouTube API one for Python. I think that's going to be a really cool one, especially for people who use YouTube. People like myself. You're going to find all these cool little things where you can get information about your own channel and just different videos out there. So if you're really trying to be like super analytical about it, it's very cool. So thanks again for watching, guys. We will see you in the next video.